Jai.
Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani ki jai.
Jai.
Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.
Jai.
Gaura Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Sri
Hari Bol.
Prabhupada.
All glories to Sri Prabhupada.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Turn right
Namo
onto North
Bhagavate
17th Street.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Devaya.
Hare Krishna. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. We will continue our study of the first canto. We're in the 11th chapter, and today's text is number 18. Varanendram puraskritya brahmanai sasumangalahai shankaturya ninadena brahmagosena chadritaha pradyujagmuritar hrishta pranayagata sadvashaha varanindram puraskritya brahmanai sasumangalahai shankaturya ninadena brahmagoshena chadritaha pratyujagmuritar hrishta pranayagata sadvashaha varanindram puraskritya brahmanai sasumangalahai shankaturya ninadena brahmagoshena chadritaha pratyujagmuritar hrishta pranayagata sadvashaha. Please chant.
Hare Krishna. Varendram puraskritya brahmane sasumangalai Shankhaturya ninadena brahma ghoshena chadrata pratyujagmo rather harshta pranayagata sadvasaha.
Varendram pura askritya brahmanai sashumangalai shankyaturya ninadena brahma goshena chadritaha patyu jagumuratir rishtaha pranayagata sadvashtaha.
Hare Krishna. Varanendram puraskritya brahmanehi sasumandale shankhaturya ninadena brahmagoshena chadrutaha pratyujagmurathe rashta pranayagata sadvasaha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Varanendram puraskritya brahmanai sashumangalai shankaturya ninadena brahmagoshena chadritaha pratyujagmurathar rishtaha pranayagata sadvasaha. Hare Krishna.
Anyone else? Okay. Varana Indram, elephants on the auspicious mission. Paraskritya, putting in the front. Brahmanahai, by the Brahmanas. Sa Sumangalahai, with all auspicious signs. Shankha, conch shell. Turya, bugle. Nina Dena, by the sound of. Brahmagoshena, by chanting the hymns of the Vedas. Cha, and. Adritaha, glorified. Prati, towards. Ujjagmuhu, proceeded hurriedly. Ratahai, on the chariots. Krishtaha, in cheerfulness. Pranayagata, saturated with affection. Sadvashaha, all respectful. Translation. They hastened toward the Lord on chariots, with Brahmanas bearing flowers. Before them were elephants, emblems of good fortune. Conch shells and bugles were sounded, and Vedic hymns were chanted. Thus they offered their respects, which were saturated with affection. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Vedic way of receiving a great personality creates an atmosphere of respect, which is saturated with affection and veneration for the person received. The auspicious atmosphere of such a reception depends on the paraphernalia described above, including conch shells, flowers, incense, decorated elephants, and the qualified Brahmanas reciting verses from the Vedic literatures. Such a program of reception is full of sincerity on the part of both the receiver and the received. Translation again. They hastened toward the Lord on chariots with Brahmanas bearing flowers. Before them were elephants, emblems of good fortune. Conch shells and bugles were sounded, and Vedic hymns were chanted. Thus they offered their respects, which were saturated with affection. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminita Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pacharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadeshatana. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjnana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, today's verse talks about Vedic culture and proper reception. So, I mean, there are a number of ways we can talk about today's verse and really this section, because right now we're reading through a section. It's a pretty decent sized clump of verses about how the Lord is being received back into Dvaraka. We read in the previous chapter how when the Lord departed from Hastinapur, how the devotees each interacted with him in their own particular way. And now we're seeing how the Lord is being received. Now, with these sections of Bhagavatam, sometimes it's the tendency of the reader to sort of gloss through them kind of quickly. We sort of see it as like a transition from, this is what happened before, this is what's going to happen now, and this is sort of like a transition of what's going on. But we know that in the Bhagavad Purana, all 18,000 verses promote bhakti. This is why Srila Vyasadeva, he was despondent. He spoke with his guru Narad Muni after he compiled all of the other Puranas and Vedic literatures. And Narad Muni told him, you didn't focus enough on bhakti. You gave everyone the final goal, but there are so many things that you put in there that people may become distracted by it, and they may miss the point of the entire principle of the Vedas, which is to serve Krishna. And so because of that, Srila Vyasadeva then wrote the Bhagavat Purana. He compiled the Bhagavat Purana, 18,000 verses, basically tells the same story. All the Puranas follow a format, but it's all focused on bhakti. And so sometimes when we come across sections like this, and everyone has their own sort of favorite sections, there are some people, they're really into the deeper philosophy. So, they get excited when they get to the 11th canto. And then some people, they're more into the stories, right? Some are more into the prayers. So you got the prayers of Queen Kunti, you got Bhishma Dev, you got Prahlad Maharaj, like that. Some are into, sort of like the core philosophy. And so for them, the parts that are most dear are like when Prahlad Maharaj is instructing his fellow students, Kapila Muni instructing his mother, like that. So there's different sections that that each type of devotee sort of relishes. But I've found that it's a kind of a rare thing for devotee, and I've mentioned this before in other classes, to see things like the universal form, or the process of creation, or the process of dissolution, which is creation in reverse. A lot of times devotees sort of gloss over areas like that. And then also areas like this, where it sort of just seems like, okay, it's a reception and it's sort of drawn out, and we get the point. They all have affection for Krishna, and they're displaying it in their ways, and we appreciate it, but we're sort of looking for the juice, the story. So what I always like to do in sections like this is I always like to point out what it means for us, when we're reading these things, because there's so many examples of receptions in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's this one, of course, but then there's also how Krishna receives his devotees. Krishna, when he received Sudama Brahmana, his old childhood schoolmate, he received him in such a way that it's almost mind blowing. He gets up, which you'll notice that anytime throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, when someone arrives, the person who they're arriving to immediately stands up. It's a sign of respect. You stand up. There's still remnants of this in Western so-called civilization, where, I mean, not much of it, but back in the day, for example, if you're having dinner and there's a big table and the people are there, if any woman were to get up or to arrive, all the men would stand up. They would leave their seat. They would wait until the woman was seated comfortably. Sometimes they would actually pull the chair out and help her, and then they would all sit back. Even if she had to leave to use the bathroom or something, everybody would stand up, and then when she would come back again, stand up, let her take her seat. And then we have the same thing with judges in the courtroom. When the judge walks in, everyone stands up. So we see this in Vedic culture. This is just a mere reflection of Vedic culture, and it's way watered down in the West, but at least it's something that's there that we can sort of relate to. But anyway, we always see that so Krishna, he stands up, he leaves his seat of comfort, he receives his guest, and he puts him in a seat, right? And then he washed his feet, massaged him, offered him arati, gave him a big feast, giving him all sorts of different things to experience, different smells, and he does the whole thing. And so, and we see this like anytime anyone's greeted, it's like an elaborate thing, and we see this. Now, a lot of times we can't do exactly how it's mentioned in the Vedas. Like in today's verse, it mentions that there's decorated elephants, right? Not everyone has an elephant in their yard. I personally don't have an elephant. So if I have a revered guest coming to me, I can't particularly have a decorated elephant, right? But I can do some of the other things, I can chant some verses, I can chant praise. So Srila Prabhupada gave us, he said, because he tries to make things easier for us, especially back in the earlier days. Those who were aspiring to Krishna consciousness were coming from a pretty rough background. So Srila Prabhupada has made it simple for us in a number of ways. So actually, I'll ask if any of you want to chime in. Does anyone here know what Srila Prabhupada said? There's 3 things that you should offer any guest, even if he's your enemy. So if someone comes to your door, even if he's your enemy, there's 3 things that you should offer him. Does anyone want to chime in on what those are? No one's unmuting. It looks like maybe Vinjavali is about to unmute. There we go. Or
Water.
Sita.
Water.
Yep.
Then just wherever he has to sit. It's asana.
Yeah.
And then third one.
Sita, David, do you want to say the third one? I saw you unmuted as well. Do you know it?
Those are the two I was going to say.
Oh, okay. So those are two. And then the third one. Go ahead.
Maybe Prabhu, respect or sweet words, something like that. I do not know.
Yeah. Sweet words.
Are you comfortable or something like
Kind words, right. So kind words. So offer them water, a place to sit, and kind words. So Srila Prabhupada boiled this down to us that we should at least offer these things. Even if someone comes over that's we consider to be our enemy. Of course, we shouldn't consider anyone our enemy, but even if they are inimical to us, this is what we should do. This is proper for anyone. So when we read sections like this of the Bhagavatam and we see how people are received, how we can apply this in our own lives. And of course, there's two ways really to apply it. One is not for everyone though. One is for, like, if you do deity worship, for example, there are these things called upachars, and there are a lot of them. There's 64. Sometimes if you're doing home worship, you do fewer, you do 16 or whatever, however many you do. But when we read about these sort of receptions, the devotees receiving Krishna, we can use these, we can actually meditate on these when we're doing our deity worship, when we're offering these upachars, because then we see this whole mood and it helps. But not everyone does deity worship. So what I'm going to focus on today is more of what everyone can do, how each of us can apply this. And so, as I mentioned, this isn't just greeting Krishna, it's also greeting anyone with respect, and it's how Krishna greets his devotees also. And so, like I said, we don't always have, like decorated elephants, things like that. But the point is that we should do whatever we can, whatever facilities we have, we want to offer that. And there's a really good reason behind it. As Srila Prabhupada pointed out in the purport, is that the person who's coming is sincere and the person who is receiving them is being sincere. And then it makes a very dynamic relationship, right? So for example, let's say there's a traveling preacher that's coming to our community, right? And so they're sincere because they want to preach. They're preaching everywhere, but they want to come and they want to give the valuable knowledge that they've been training for their whole lives, or for many decades, and they've heard from so many revered people, and they want to repeat that knowledge. They studied Srila Prabhupada's books, so they come and they're sincere. Now, if they are received in a very sincere way, again with whichever facilities we can, the more the better, but whatever we have, we should give. If we greet them properly, this is what happens is, first of all, they become encouraged and inspired. And then so whatever preaching they're going to do, it's going to be of a greater magnitude because they feel comfortable. They feel like, well, whatever I'm going to give to these people, they're going to appreciate, it already shows that they're appreciating it. So they'll give extra care for those devotees. It's a nice reciprocation. And then also what it does is it will encourage them to come back at another time. Maybe it'll be the next year. Maybe they do the same route every year. So maybe, like that, or maybe several times a year they're in the area, but they'll be more encouraged to come back. And another thing it will do is it will encourage them also to preach more in that area. So sometimes the traveling preachers, if they're in an area where they see that, the culture is not very much practiced, they're less inclined to preach to people, because if the people become interested, where are they going to go to then cultivate Krishna consciousness, right? So sometimes, and I've seen this, is a traveling preacher, he'll be in an area where there's two temples, one's sort of close and then one's a bit further, or a center, not necessarily a temple, but a center. And so he's preaching to some people there, and he'll actually suggest that this person go to the one that's a little further away because he knows that he'll be taken more care of there. He'll get a better idea of what Krishna consciousness truly is if they go to the other center. So he'll say, yeah, there's a center close, you can go to that one too, but I think you'll really appreciate this one. Go and see so-and-so Prabhu. I think you guys will really connect, like that. And so when there's this sincere relationship between both the person that's being received and the receivers, so many things go much nicer. And so since we see that there are so many examples in the Bhagavatam of people being received, we should actually start following this. So if we're not following these three, just the water, the place to sit, and the kind words, then we got a long way to go. Because if we are following those three, then there's a big gradation between those three and then what we're going through in these this group of verses right here. There's a lot of gray area that we can up our game from those three to we can expand that to however many things that we can offer, however many different methods that we can use to make a revered guest feel comfortable. So that's revered guests. So I want to go back for a little bit to even receiving an enemy, because I think that many of us don't really even follow this. Someone comes into our house and we sort of just follow, whatever samskars we had in our life, whatever we were trained as a child was a proper greeting, we sort of do that. So different parts of the world, people will do different things. Like actually my mom, for example, she's from Europe. She actually took a boat to America. So she has a little bit of culture because, Europeans tend to be a little more cultured than the Americans. It's a tendency. It's not always the case, but it's there. So anyway, anytime we were working outside, the neighbors would be up and, for example, they'd be helping us paint our barn. So we're all outside painting the barn. And my mom would come out with this tray of lemonade. It's got the tray and the pitcher and the glasses with ice. And okay, guys, time to take a break. And then she's pouring lemonade for everyone, right? This is sort of like the water. It doesn't have to be water. It just has to be some sort of refreshment. But the reason Srila Prabhupada said water is anyone can get water, right? Anyone can get water. Anyone can offer a seat, like even if it's on the ground. You do something nice, you take a load off. And kind words, anyone can offer kind words, right? And so, we see that there are semblances of this, and even if, for example, so I gave the example of, my neighbors were working on a barn, but even if there were road workers out working in front of the house, and it's a hot day, she would bring out lemonade to them. They're not working for us. They're just, they just happen to be nearby, and she sees that they're working. It's hot and it's sweaty. And so this is a nice thing to do. She doesn't know who they are. She doesn't know if they're nice or not. All she knows is they're out working and it's hot. And so she's going to bring them lemonade. So this is a nice reflection of culture. So for us, at the very least, since Srila Prabhupada recommended it, we should, anytime someone comes to our house, we should offer these three things. And no matter what, and sometimes we sort of like come up with an excuse, like, like a neighbor comes over to borrow the lawnmower. Well, that doesn't require for us to, invite them in and have it. But think about it though. If we do, a neighbor comes over and they're like, hey, my lawnmower is broken. Can I borrow yours? Yeah. You know what? Come in a second. I got to find the key to the shed. Come in a second. It's hot out there. Have a seat. So they come in, they have a seat. Let me get you something to drink. What do you like? Lemonade, water, what kind of, okay. And then you get that and then say, by the way, my wife and I were just noticing your garden is absolutely beautiful. Every year it gets better and better. Those new pink flowers that you got, the really big, bright ones, they really just set off it looks like a whole new property. Now imagine how that person feels. They came over and they feel like a little embarrassed that they have to ask you to borrow their lawnmower. And, they were invited out of the heat. They had a nice place to sit. It didn't take very long. The way I just said it, you could do it that quickly, 2 minutes. And they got a compliment, and now there's a nice exchange going on. You're letting them borrow the lawnmower, and you're also appreciating some of the work they do, and then a relationship can build on that. It's not just an impersonal thing. And so this is part of what Vaishnava culture is all about. It's about being perfect gentlemen. Srila Prabhupada said, when someone asked Srila Prabhupada, how would we recognize one of your devotees? And he didn't say they're the ones, with the bed sheets and the paint on their head. He said he will be a perfect gentleman, perfect ladies and gentlemen, right? And so that's how we are meant to be noticed, by our character. We're defined by our character, not by our externals. We're not the body, and so we're not these externals. These are all utpadis. And so the important thing is what's there, the substance, not the shadow, but the substance. And so culture should be there. We should be cultivating, for the lack of a better word, culture, right? And the way we do this is when studying through Bhagavatam in sections like this, for example, we start thinking, okay, how do I greet just guests to begin with? I'm not even talking about a revered person who's coming in yet. I'm just talking about just anyone that pops in on me. Am I at least following these three things? Because if we're not, we should try to do that. We should get in the habit. It doesn't take long. It doesn't take many resources, like, as we mentioned before, water. Anyone can get water. Place to sit can even be the floor, and pleasant words. These, they're simple. And then from there, we should always want to up our game, right? Once we perfect that, we'll actually get a taste of it. We'll see that, and some of you probably do this already and have already increased. But what happens is when we do this, these three small things in receiving any guest, we sort of get a taste for it, and we see how relationships are much more genuine, much more relatable. And we actually want to do more, Next time the person comes over, we want to offer them this really great snack that we just learned how to make, right? Or whatever the case may be. But the relationship builds, and this is what we're meant to do. So that's even someone who is inconsequential. A person coming visit should be like that. So then clearly, if someone who we admire is coming over, and we're not even getting to the highly revered people yet, we're just talking about someone we appreciate and admire, we should show that through our reception of them. So a fellow aspiring Vaishnava comes over, and we want to receive them with these three, but then also more. And we want to say, what inspires me most about you? What I like most about you is you have this quality of humility that I've never seen in anyone before. And you can give some examples. And of course, if they're humble, they're not going to want to hear the praise, but at least they'll appreciate that there's some sort of nice relationship happening there. And, I really like hanging out with you, because I feel like when I hang out with you, I want to become more humble or more tolerant, whatever the quality is that this particular person imbibes. And then we see that the relationship will actually grow in such a dynamic way when we do like that. And now when we get to people who are, highly revered, like traveling people, let's say our guru is coming to our town, let's say we don't live in the same area, but he's coming. So we want to do our absolute best. And we saw examples of this with Srila Prabhupada and his disciples. They would all go to the airport, right? And they would go, back then you could actually go into the terminal. So as soon as Srila Prabhupada would get off the airplane, there would be all these devotees, and they're offering kirtan, and they give him a garland. They all offer obeisances. Sometimes they would wash his feet right there in the terminal. They would offer arati, flower, like I said, pushpanjali sometimes. So many things. And they would do whatever they had the capacity to do. Sometimes there were brahmanas chanting verses. At least there were people chanting Hare Krishna, but sometimes there would also be, Brahma Samhita was sometimes sung. And so, they would do whatever they could. They didn't have the decorated elephants, but, they did what they could. And this is what we're meant to do, right? So we can still follow this. And when we do follow this, like I said, it deepens our appreciation for Krishna consciousness. It's culture that Krishna appreciates. This is how people interact in the spiritual world. And so if we want to go back to the spiritual world, we have to understand how this culture works, right? So these sections, even though sometimes they seem like they're either filler or, just sort of like a transition between, stories, they're actually highly instructional for us to understand what things we are to do. Now, today's verse, Srila Prabhupada mentioned in the purport that the Vedic reception depends on, these sort of paraphernalia. And in one sense it does. It depends on it. Of course, anytime you're talking about anything in spirituality, nothing depends on anything material. So when reading like the deity worship handbook, for example, when it talks about the upachars, which are also ways to receive someone, as I mentioned earlier with the deity worship, there starts with 64 and it breaks down. If you can't do those, then it do these, and it gets to 16, or you can do fewer, or at least 2. And then it says whether you can offer all of these or none of these, the most important upachar is, does anyone know? Does anyone know what the most important upachar is? It's bhakti. Just like when that verse, when Krishna lists us, the things that we can offer him, a leaf, flower, fruit, or water, he mentions bhakti twice. So the most important thing, of course, it's not that we want to collect all these things and show the person, see, look, we have all these things. This is what we're receiving you with. No, it's the love. It's the intent behind it that's really felt. It's not the elephants that were impressing Krishna, or the auspicious emblems, or the number of brahmanas that were chanting the Vedic hymns, or any of that. It's the love that they felt for him when they were receiving him. And they were showing that through these items, right? Because they have them available. And so, they decorated the elephants, and they're blowing the conch shells and the bugles, and, they have all the flag, all of this. And this is how we should do whatever our capacity is when someone comes like that. So first, like I said, someone comes, you stand up and you greet them. There are many examples in Bhagavatam, at least a couple that I can think of, where someone didn't stand up and there were harsh consequences. Ramaharshana comes to mind, where the Supreme Lord shows up, Lord Balaram, and somehow he didn't recognize, he didn't stand up, and he got killed with kusha grass because of it. He was performing a ritual. And so, some said then to Balaram, hey, but we're doing the ritual. So yeah, but what's the ritual for? The ritual is to see the Supreme Lord. So if the Supreme Lord shows up, you stand up. This is how it goes. This is culture. And we see this everywhere. Everything. It's just first stand up, and then that person comes, and then offer obeisances, water, seat, kind words. Those are all given. But then whatever else we can give too. If we can offer arti, offer arti. If we have flowers. If we have foodstuffs, like that. But we should always do as much as possible. And we should always try to increase what we're doing. And we can gain inspiration from these sections of Bhagavatam. And not just this section here, there are several of them. Anywhere either Krishna's greeting someone's greeting Krishna, or devotees are greeting each other. There will be this description. Like I think it was about a month ago, we sort of talked about the anatomy of a prayer, because we were listening to the prayers of the ladies of Hastinapur who were on the roof, and they're offering prayers to Krishna. And if we read enough prayers in Bhagavatam, we start seeing that there's sort of like a rough outline that these different devotees follow. Each prayer has a different flavor to it, but they sort of have this outline. They start with a little bit of awe and veneration. They basically go through the peace formula. They mention that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, that everything comes from him, the Ishavasya principle, that everything in this material world comes from him, but he is aloof from the material world. He's not affected by the material, like that. And then there'll be other praises, and then that's where the personal stuff starts coming in after that, right? And then the way it winds up. So there's sort of like an anatomy, a rough anatomy that you can see, like an outline. And so with that, we can learn how to formulate our prayers. So we're not being so self-conscious with our prayers. We're not asking Krishna to give us stuff. We're following in the footsteps of those who have prayed to Krishna, how to pray to Krishna. And similarly here, we follow in the footsteps of those who have received Krishna, and who have received devotees, and who have been received by Krishna, to properly show our Vaishnava culture in a tangible way. And if we do this, then not only will we be more palatable to the people that we're dealing with, But we're going to make spiritual advancement much quicker because, like I said, this is the way people deal in the spiritual world. So this is our training here in the material world, how to deal properly so that we're prepared in the spiritual world like that. And so I'm going to stop here and see if anyone has anything to add or if there are any questions or further discussions on the matter. And since no one's saying anything, oh, looks like Dronacharya is unmuted. Prabhu, go ahead.
I was just going to thank you very much for the class.
Sure.
It's very nice and very instructive on how we should receive people, especially devotees, and how to build relationships through that. I like the word that was used in here, affection, so that there's an affection toward them, and that, I think especially for us, that comes with, really we're putting our heart into it. It's not a mechanical activity, but it goes beyond maybe the sense of just responsibility, but I'm actually doing it, for, to please, and being able to honor the other person. So I like that word that was used, the affection, that stood out to me.
Yes, and that is the upachar. No matter how many you're offering, that's the most important one. Bhakti would be love, devotion, affection. That's the gist. So I'm glad you that struck a particular note with you, because that is the most important thing.
I also recall several times we had situations, I don't know what it was, with Hari Ashra Prabhu down at his place, the Bhakti Garden, through the years, or even at the temple, when things weren't necessarily particularly, may not have had all the proper bedding or the proper, layout and situations that you would have ideally wanted to have to receive a guest. I remember several times somebody saying, you offer everything you have, and they'll understand, it's like, so it may not be the ideal situation. Maybe you wish you had more to offer, but this is what I have. And like, you give it, and then it actually changes the whole feeling.
Absolutely. In I think it was, it must have been 1994. There was some sort of North American GBC like emergency meeting. And so basically all of the North American GBC came to the Philadelphia temple for some meeting. And back in 94, I mean, you were there at least in 95, but you remember the state of the temple then. And so we had all these VIPs coming and we didn't have anywhere to put them. So, Vrindavan Das Thakur Prabhu went to Sam's Club and he got a bunch of cots because we couldn't afford to get a bunch of beds, but, we had to at least get cots. And I don't know if anyone's ever slept on a cot, but it's okay. But if you compare it to a bed, it's, if you're let's put it this way. If you're accustomed to sleeping on a bed, a cot is not something that you want to sleep on.
Right.
If you're accustomed to sleeping on the floor, a cot's not even something that you want to sleep on. It's sort of like something that you have to be accustomed to. Like you have to be accustomed to a cot to really appreciate a cot. Like I prefer the floor to the cot, hands down. But it's nice to, especially if you have asthma or things like that, to get you off the floor. So anyway, we got a bunch of cots. And we had to do a whole bunch of laundry because we had spare blankets, but they've been sitting around for a while, so we wanted to make sure they smelled clean and fresh. And we're really nervous about receiving these guests. And my guru said the same thing to us. He said, "Look, we're going to offer them the best that we have, and you just offer it with sincerity, and they will appreciate it." And that's exactly what you were saying, exactly what Hari Ashra Prabhu was saying too. And that's the most important thing. So again, it's not what we have, but we should use the best of what we have. So if we had, for example, a bunch of those memory foam mattresses and we offered cots instead, that wouldn't be a good display of our affection, right? But we give the best that we have and with the most possible affection that we can give. Yeah, thank you for adding that. That was That's the most important part of all of this.
Thank you, Prabhu. Your class was so nice, and also you actually showed properly, how we should receive a guest in Vedic culture, because Vedic culture was so great, and it still is great, but people are not following that. That is the problem. But you're reminding us, how to receive a guest, and we should follow that. And it's actually about Krishna, because Krishna was receiving so many people in Dwarka, so that was receiving Krishna in Dwarka. So they had to do as much as they can, with their maximum capacities. And that's what they were doing, actually, all the Dwarka Vasis.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu. Nice
Thank you.
class.
Thank you. And the beauty of it for them is that this was all just spontaneous. They did it automatically. They just grabbed the best of what they had and ran toward Krishna, to give him, oh, here, welcome back. They're very happy to see him. For us, we sort of have to take it as instruction, because, we wouldn't automatically do that. We don't automatically greet people like that. We haven't been trained like that. And we don't have that natural, overwhelming affection to just, do things like that. So in the meantime, before we become spontaneous in our devotional service, we have to practice. And so we can learn from these spontaneous examples of these devotees. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, like you're saying that, this culture is slowly going down. And the elders, they should teach the children, because that generation, they're not that free, and they're not that open to give up everything. No. Oh, why are you worrying about so much about that person? It's okay, they have come. Like that culture, children are not getting the old, that Vedic culture.
Yeah, that's true.
That's really unfortunate, and they should continue to teach you. That's what I feel. Because younger generation, they need to know that.
I agree. Acharya Prabhu, it looks like you have something to add, please.
Yes, Hare Krishna. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I have a funny story about this.
Good.
Prabhupada told some devotees, including Paramananda Prabhu, who was the former president at Gitanagari, that a householder, before he takes prasad, he should go outside and call out, does anyone want prasad? Come and take 3 times.
Yeah.
So he actually was doing that for a while. So one day, all of the at the time there was a Gurukul, all of the students, a few dozen students and a dozen teachers, they all hid behind the trees by his house. And when he called that out, expecting no one, or maybe one person, 50 people jumped out and said, yes, we want prasad.
Yeah.
I thought it was just a funny story I wanted to share. That's all.
That's a great story.
And thanks for the nice class.
Sure. And I'm sure he wished he had Draupadi's famous pot in that situation.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he made do somehow. Yeah. Yeah, culture is a very important thing. Anyone else? So sometimes when I give lead a class, sometimes I give homework. I'd like to give homework if that's okay with everyone. You don't really have to do it, but I hope you do. But what I'm hoping is that each of you will just attempt to do these 3 the next time anyone comes to us. Just try it. Offer them a place to sit, give them some water or some sort of beverage or whatever you have, and kind words, and just see what the difference is between doing that and not doing that. And because this is basically what our process is we chant Hare Krishna. We're asking to be engaged in Krishna service when we chant Hare Krishna, and simultaneously Chaito Darpana Marjanam, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pointed out in his first Shastra verse, it's cleansing our heart. We're starting to see the world as it is, right? So we're asking for Krishna's service, and then the world is becoming clearer. And then so now we see, now that the world is clearer, we can see what service to engage in that we're asking for. And so then it's up to us then, because then there's free will. Are we going to serve according to that new clarity that we got from chanting, and then continue on and then keep asking for more service and keep getting more clarity? Or are we going to say, yeah, that one's a little inconvenient though, like I understand, but it's not practical, it's antiquated, it's like an unimportant tradition or whatever. And so sometimes when we get clarity, we sort of dismiss it and we think, yeah, I'll focus on the next thing, like that. And the danger of that is, like I said, we're asking for Krishna's service, and then Krishna is showing us what service we can do. And if we don't take advantage of that and actually do that service, that particular service that Krishna has just showed us what to do, shown us, then it'll be a little while before he will show us again something else that we can follow. He gives us what we need. And so, yeah, culture, relationships are very important things. Sadhu Sangha, there's Shraddha, then there's Sadhu Sangha, right? Sadhu Sangha is super important. And we have a tendency to think, Sadhu Sangha just means hanging out with other devotees. But the essence of Sadhu Sangha is the Sat part, is the eternal. There has to be a transfer of relationship of this eternal principle there, not just hanging out and eating together, but reawakening our eternal Satchidananda position, right? And so there has to be that transfer there. Otherwise, it's not really Sadhu Sangha. And so when we study culture and follow it like this, then automatically we start to relish that Sadhu Sangha, and then we look for it more. It's not something that we have to schedule, like, oh, I haven't seen devotees in a while, let me schedule it. No, it's, we'll always be, looking for the, oh, now I want to go and see this Prabhu because, they're so good at this particular aspect of bhakti, and I really need that in my life right now. And oh, now, I need to understand this because someone asked me a question and I didn't understand it, but I know this Prabhu, he'll know the answer. So now I'm going to go to them and I'll find out, and then I can, give the answer to whoever asked me, like that. So, and this is how it works. So if we have these really nice, deep relationships, then all of this can work very nicely. So that's the homework I give to you. Do those three things. If you already do the three things, then
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
I just want to say that I'm not bragging, but whenever
you already do the three.
When some construction worker comes to our house, whenever they come,
yeah,
we give them lunch. My husband says,
good.
Some pizza or anything, but
yeah.
It feels very good. Last time, this weekend, I made frozen pizza, but I put something on it with cheese and everything and nicely, and I gave him, we gave my husband and I, so we felt so good, and it feels very good to do that. In my father's house, I also used to do the same thing.
Good. And they appreciate it, right?
Yeah, they eat it very nicely. They feel good. And so we give them. And only one thing I have to improve I'm kind to them too. But in general, I have to improve my kind words, how to use more kind words.
Yeah.
In general, with the people, think nicely, think about them, other people nicely. And, how can we do that? How can we become more kind?
How can we work on our kind words? Well, generally, there's always something, even people who annoy us to no end, there's always something that we like about the person. There's always something. There has to be. Even if it's the fact that they always are clean, right? Or whatever the case may be, there's something. And so you just compliment that. That's it. They take care of something nicely. There's something that everyone does something nicely, right? Yes. And so we can just appreciate that.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice point. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. May I add a few things?
Please.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you for giving this wonderful class and giving really practical points to implement and practice. And like you said, the homework part very much. So thank you for that. I see the kind words would be coming automatically when we start looking at this way. when we think about the association as a sung, and when we think about the relationship, so when person thinks, oh, I wanted to do relationship for that person, but rather than thinking relationship is something my needs, if we understand that powerfully in our mind, that relation is for my needs, then we will do every good thing, whatever we wanted to sustain that relationship and possibly maintain that relationship. And because of that, the consequence would be we'll do the best for maintaining that relationship. So always look for a relationship as an opportunity for serving Krishna.
There you go.
And the consciousness, that's the consciousness part of it. And look for the relationship as a devotee, and try, even though they don't come to the temples or not reading Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita or anything, but be an example for them to see that cultivation of knowledge occurring within our consciousness, and see the relationship is my need, then automatically things falls into the place.
Good. All right, Krishna. Thank you. Anything else?
Okay, if there's nothing else, we can end the class here. Thank Chair Chandra for this message today. Hope that everyone has a wonderful Krishna conscious day ahead. Hare Krishna.
All right, Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Gurubhyeva cha patitana pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai.
Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai. Hare Krishna, Chair Chandra.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.